Before we continue with the video, if you like what I'm doing here on this channel, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel a lot. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Welcome back to my Create an RPG series. Now, what we've done so far is we have created one property system which will make use of the gameplay tags. In addition to that, we have also created an XP system. Now, the XP system was more like a demonstration of how we can make use of the gameplay tags in the property system. But today we will be resuming to continue developing the framework. And today we will be actually taking our first step into making this really awesome, which is we will be adding attributes to our systems. And this is where I get really excited, because now we're really going to start delving into like all of the powerful stuff that we will be creating in this framework. So let's just get started immediately. To begin, we want to create a folder which will hold our new system, which will be a folder we call attributes. Inside of that, we will be creating a blueprint component. So we'll go to blueprint class and choose an active component. We'll call it BPC attributes. Opening that up, this is what we have. We remove the tick, we don't want it. And the very first attribute that we're going to be creating is going to be health. So let's create a variable and we'll call it health. Now, we want to have a structure for this because we want to have a group of different information that is related to our health. Now, this is taking a bit of inspiration from how Tom Luhmann explained how he does attributes, which is really cool. We'll do something similar, but not exactly the same, because I have a different preference than he has. However, to start off, what we need to do is we need to go and create a structure. So we'll right click, go to blueprints and choose a structure. We'll type in s_attributes. And opening that up, we want to create 4 variables so that we have 4 variables. So creating 3 essentially. We want all of these to be floats. And the first one we can call base value. So this is going to be like our base or our current value of something. So in the case of health, this will be our current health. If we had 50 hit points out of a total of 100, then the base value here would be 50 essentially. The next value is going to be a delta. A delta will be a numerical value that is sort of representing a temporary or permanent buff or debuff or change in our value. So if we, for example, wanted to have temporarily have our hit points reduced by a few points or increased with a few points, then that would be the delta. A better example maybe would be something like intellect. Let's say we have a value of 14 in intellect base value. We might equip a ring that gives us +2 intellect. Then equipping that ring would give us +2 or 2 in value of delta as long as we have it equipped. Meaning that our final value would be our base value plus our delta value in this case, which would be 16 then in total. Our next value is going to be a multiplier. This will be exactly the same as delta, except that it will be a multiplicative change in the values. So it could be something that is a buff, a debuff, temporary or permanent, and it would be affecting the values with a multiplication instead. So if you have 10% more strength, for example, so you had 10%, you had a 10 in value, base value here for strength, and you had a 10% multiplier in here, then your final strength would be 11 because it would be base value times 1.1, which is 10% more. So that's how that's going to work. And these will be working in conjunction with each other. You'll have base value, adding the delta, multiplying the multiplier. The last value we're going to be adding here is going to be max, which will be our limiter for our stat. And this could be, for example, if you have 20 strength and you have 100% multiplier for strength, then that would be a total of 40 value, but maybe your system only allows 30 to be the max that you get, and then 30 would be what caps that off, sort of. Among the default values, we will leave everything to 0 except for multiplier, which we will leave at 1, just so in case you don't forget to set it at some point and then you'll suddenly have like no value. Multiplier of 1 will always get you to have the value that you have set currently. So that is what we will be having this for. Closing down the attribute, we can now go back to our Blueprint component, and here we will now choose to this attribute structure. It is not appearing. Let's see, maybe we need to save. I typed it wrong. Let's see, attribute. There we go. Now it should be easier to find. There we go. Like so. So we can now set some default values here. We can say maybe like, since it's hit points, our health, our base value might be 100, our max might be 100, something along those lines. Like so. Now we want to harness the power of tags in conjunction with this system. So what we want to be able to do is that from different other parts that we will be coding later on, we will want to have the ability to say we want to manipulate or affect the attribute in some way, but we don't need to know about all the information. So we just want to send in a tag saying that we want to do something with this health tag, for example, and then have the system handle that. How we're going to go about doing that is we are going to first of all be creating a tag. So we'll go to project settings, we'll go to gameplay tags, we'll add a tag, we'll call it attribute.health. Now this will be our first attribute stat that we create. Going back to our component, now we can create a function. Let's call this function get attribute from tag. So someone sends in the tag here, so we'll put an input that is of gameplay tag, and we'll type in that tag searched for is what we get in here as a parameter. Now, since this system handles structures and not actually tags, we need to do some kind of interpretation or translation of this. So to handle that in a convenient manner, we will be creating a macro like we did earlier for the gameplay tags in the property system. So we'll create a macro and we'll call it determine attributes. And we'll have two inputs for it. The first one being an executable, and we'll call that execute. So that the name disappears. The second one will be a gameplay tag, and hopefully this is yes. And we'll call it attribute tag. Like so. As an output for this, we want to have what kind of a structure that we have determined from this. So we want to have, first of all, an executable node. And we want it to represent the structure that we have found. So health in this case would be 1, and then we can have another one which will be our fallback, which will be like no attribute, meaning we didn't have this attribute that was searched for. Like so. So inside of this macro, this is going to be like not super clean, but it doesn't happen in too many places. What we're essentially going to be doing is we're going to be checking if this attribute tag equals something, and we're going to be saying if it is health, we'll add a branch, and we'll say if it matches health, then this was a health tag that was sent in, and otherwise it is an attribute that we didn't have. So going back now, we can use this determine attribute, and we can send in the information, and out we'll get an executable pin for health if that is what we want to react to now. Now this function wants to return the actual structure. So when we have this health here, we know that health is the structure we want to return. So we can drag out health, and we can right click and promote to local variable. We can name the local variable local attribute found. And the reason we do this is because when we add more attributes here later on, we will be saving all of them to this local attribute, so that when we go to our return node here, we can return the value of the local attribute found, and it will be correct regardless of which of the different paths we may have taken, essentially. We will rename this one to actually just attribute found. And now we have the ability to actually get a structure of, for example, health by just sending a tag into this system. Now the next logical step is that we will somehow want to affect this stat or attribute in some way. So we want to create a function for that as well. So we go to functions, we create a function called change attribute. And just like before, we want this to be flexible, so we want to be able to send in a gameplay tag as an input. Just say like attribute health, and then we can change it. So we'll say attribute tag as an input here. So the first step is we need to determine which tag does this, which structure does this tag correspond to. And then we have health here now, which is the only case we have. And then after that, we want to go and do actually our change. So let's create a function that actually does the change. So we'll call this change attribute value. And this function, we want to have, first of all, the structure that we want to change. So we'll add a parameter here and say s attribute. Important here is though that this needs to be, if we go back here, we will have multiple different paths here. So let's say we had like this, we had a rewrote node here, and let's say this was another one. We wanted to call this function at both of these different cases, but we will be sending in different structures. In this case health, and in this case here we would have sent something else. So we're sending in different values, or different structures, but just sending in the structures would mean if we do any change in there, we would just be sending in a copy, and it would just be locally changing that structure, and no effect would actually occur. So what we need to do is we need to send in a reference to the structure here. So we go over here, change the input to pass by reference, meaning that whatever we're sending in here will actually have its value changed by what we're doing in here. So we'll change this name to attribute to change. This is very important. Make sure that you don't miss this part. In addition to that, we also want to have a value that we change it by. Now it will be by default changing this as a pass by value. We don't want that for any of the other things. This wants to be of the type float, and we want to have this say value change. In addition to that, we also want to determine here what we are actually changing, because remember, in our structure we have 4 different things that we could potentially change, so we want to have the ability to change all of them. So we'll create an enumerator for this to allow us to easily do this from a calling function. So we'll do an enumerator, we'll call it e_attribute. Opening that up, we want to have 5 different values. Now we have 4 here, but I also want to have a default one, so if you accidentally put in something wrong, then we will notice that easily in the code somewhere. So adding 5 rows. The first one will just be a slash. The second one will be base value. Let's try that again. The third one will be the delta. The fourth one will be the multiplier. And the last one will be the max value. Like so. Save and close and go back to our component, and we can now have another input here saying that we want to have it of the e attribute type. Did I misspell this one as well? Oh, there we go. And we can call this the attribute type to change. So that's super clear. Now, essentially what we want to do to make this easy is we want to drag out and switch on this. We'll get all the different options that we have available to us. And we want to return this function with no value essentially, because we're just doing the changes in here. So if we have a blank value, we're just returning. In the other cases though, we want to do some logic. So we want to take our structure over here. We want to type in set members, so we can set individual parts of this structure. Now we have, clicking on this, we can expose whatever pins we want to here. In the first case, we're going to expose base value, because that's going to be what happens here. And we can actually do something like this, so it's a little bit cleaner. And the base value we're going to be changing with here is going to be whatever we had from before, and adding with whatever value change we have here. Also, let's make sure to change the name there properly. So we drag this one down and we break it to have its old value. And then we say we want to add base value. So we'll add. Can drag this off a little bit. And then we can right click and say value change. So we get the, okay, we need to recompile, so it won't recognize it because I changed the name. We'll recompile again. And value change. And we'll just hook it up over here. So this value now is the new value we're going to be setting over here. So now we need to do the exact same thing for all the three other values. So we'll do it like so. We'll also need 3 more additions here. So we'll drag off the delta to over there, the multiplier to over there, and the max to over there. We'll make sure that the delta is sent into the top, and the multiplier to the top, and max to the top. And the value change goes into all of these other ones. The result from these, of course, go into their corresponding structs member setting. And we need to make sure that we're also sending in the reference to the structure so that it has the change like so. And then after that, we just return all of these. There we go. So this will now be change whatever of our values. So if we go back here now, we can remove this one and we can say change attribute value. And instead of having that reroute node, we'll do it like that. So we'll send in our attribute here. Our value to change here will be a value that we need to add to the function. So what we can do is we can just drag it over here, so it will add an input, and then do the same for this one, and it will add an input, and then we can just break them because we don't need to have them like that. We can just type in get value change, and we'll have a node over here which will make it easier, look a little bit cleaner. And we do the same for get attribute type to change, and hook that one up as well. So we get these values from this input over here, and we'll just set them here. And after that, we will just be returning essentially like so. With all of this in place now, we should be able to test this. Let's go to our third person character. We will add our BPC attributes component, like so. We will type in a new keyboard number 6 input here, so we have something to react with. And what we'll do is we'll get the attributes, and let's say we want to change our health now, let's say, to see if that works. So let's do a change attribute. And also something that we could do here is let's remove this, go back to our BPC attributes. We want to make it clear that this change attribute function is the one that we want to call from other outside programs, and not this change attribute value. So we could set this one to private, meaning that it should only be used inside of this class, so that when we're over here and we type in change, we only get available the one that we're actually going to be calling, making sure that we're encapsulating and making it easy for both calling programs and securing the data in the receiving functions essentially. So we're going to change the attribute value, and we're going to say we want to change the tag of health, and we want to change it by -20, and what we want to change is the base value. All good and fine. Let's see if that actually worked by using the other function that we had, which was get attribute from tag. Create a node like so. We'll say that we want to have health. We get the health from here. We can break the structure. And let's print this value and print the base value like so. Okay, so since we start at 100, we're removing 20. We're getting the value afterwards and seeing what is it. Let's see if that works. We press 6 and we see that it's 18 now. And again, if we were to press 6 again, you should see it goes to 60 because we're reducing it by 20 every time we're doing that. So that seems to be working good. And I think that's a good point to stop for today. And I hope I'll see you in the next episode. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you did not like it, leave a dislike. Leave any suggestions or comments you have down below. Subscribe and share this video if you want to see more like it in the future. That is all for now. Keep on learning. Take care.